Ever catch yourself thinking, some skills are like the hidden MVPs, right? Not always in the spotlight, but totally make or break it.
Hmm.
I like that. That's us today, folks, diving deep into a skill that often flies under the radar in occupational therapy, interviewing.
Oh, interesting.
And hold on, before anyone pictures those nerve-wracking job interviews, we're talking about a different beast entirely.
Right.
This is about how OTs use interviews to really get their clients. Those conversations that set the stage for everything that follows. I've got your stack of articles right here, and let me tell you, fascinating stuff.
It really is incredible how much those early conversations can shape the entire therapeutic journey.
Okay, so one article calls these interviews the gateway to understanding, which I thought was intriguing. What's happening on that deeper level that makes them different from, say, a quick chat during a routine checkup?
It's the difference between just treating a condition and truly empowering someone to reclaim their lives.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine this. You're an OT working with someone after a stroke. You could just focus on restoring physical function, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
But without understanding their daily routines, what they value, what brings them joy, you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
So it's like you can hand someone the tools, but the real magic happens when they connect with the why behind using them.
Exactly. And there's actually research backing this up. This article highlights a study where occupational therapists who really prioritize these in-depth interviews saw significantly better outcomes for their clients. People were more engaged in their therapy, reported higher levels of satisfaction, were more likely to achieve their goals, all because those conversations help therapists create truly personalized treatment plans.
Which makes sense, right? That feeling of, I'm not just a number, someone really sees me and what matters to me.
Yeah.
But the articles also bring up some real challenges with these interviews. Time crunches, emotional complexities, even the setting itself can be tricky. That's a lot to navigate.
It definitely is. Occupational therapists are often working within very real constraints. And, trying to have a heart-to-heart in a noisy hospital ward, for example, that's tough.
Yeah, not exactly the ideal setting to open up and share what's really going on. So how do therapists even begin to create that safe space when the environment is working against them?
That's where the real artistry comes in, and this next article dives into this beautifully. It's about mastering certain skills to build rapport and trust, even amidst the chaos. Things like active listening, nonverbal communication, basically, becoming a master of setting the stage, even when the stage is, well, less than ideal.
Okay, setting the stage amidst chaos, that's a powerful image. What does that look like in practice?
So imagine an OT meeting a client for the first time in a busy rehab facility. Instead of jumping right into questions, they take a moment to make eye contact, offer a genuine greeting, maybe even adjust the seating to be more conducive to conversation. It's about creating that haven within the interview itself, no matter what's going on around them.
It's like those nonverbal cues speak volumes before a word is even spoken. And speaking of words, the article really stressed the importance of listening, but it's obviously more than just, nodding along. What's the OT really listening for in that exchange?
Exactly. It's about listening with your whole being. Tuning into not just what the client is saying, but how they're saying it. It's picking up on those subtle cues, the pauses, the hesitations, even the things left unsaid.
Right, because sometimes what's not said speaks volumes.
Exactly. Because sometimes the most vital information is communicated through body language, tone of voice, even silence.
It's like being a detective almost, searching for those hidden clues that can completely change the course of therapy. But tell me.
It's like that saying, the body keeps the score. Even when we try to mask what we're going through, those nonverbal cues often tell a different story. And for an OT, those cues can be critical in making sure therapy is truly effective. This article actually gives a fascinating example.
Oh, I love a good example. Hit me with it.
Okay, so picture this. An OT is interviewing a client who's recovering from a car accident. The client's saying all the right things, insisting they're eager to return to their job as a chef. But the therapist notices they keep rubbing their hands together almost nervously when they talk about being back in the kitchen.
Okay, so a tiny detail,
But a powerful one, right? That one small observation sparks a line of questioning that reveals the client is actually terrified of burns or cuts now, and it's causing immense anxiety.
Wow, that's incredible. Had the therapist not picked up on that, the whole trajectory of their therapy could have been completely different.
Exactly. And that's the power of this deeper level of listening. It's about looking beyond the surface and creating a space where those hidden anxieties can be acknowledged and addressed. And sometimes those anxieties relate directly to the core of occupational therapy, a client's ability to engage in meaningful activities. It's not just about uncovering any hidden feelings, it's about those that affect how we live our lives.
You're right, we haven't connected this back to the heart of OT yet.
Exactly. This article gives a fascinating example, highlighting a specific framework used by OTs called the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, or COPPM. It's all about identifying what the client wants to be able to do in their daily life.
Okay, I've heard of the COPPM. So using it during these interviews, how does that actually reveal those hidden needs?
So picture this. An OT is interviewing a client who loves to garden, but is recovering from a hand injury. The client's downplaying their limitations, saying, "Oh, I can manage." But using the COPPM framework, the therapist asks specific questions about their ability to perform tasks essential for gardening cooking tools, transplanting seedlings, weeding. That kind of structured approach, it helps uncover those subtle but incredibly important details.
Because while they technically can manage, as they said, the reality might be quite different.
Exactly. This structured line of questioning reveals that while the client can technically manage, the pain makes gardening miserable now.
So then the therapist can actually address that, which might not have been the focus otherwise.
Exactly. With this deeper understanding, the therapist can tailor interventions, maybe focusing on pain management techniques, adaptive gardening tools, or even exploring alternative ways to connect with nature.
It makes you realize just how crucial a framework like the COPPM can be during those early interviews. It's like having a roadmap to make sure you're addressing the client's real priorities.
It's a game changer. It helps therapists cover all the bases, making sure they're addressing the things that matter most to the client.
Which, at the end of the day, is what it's all about, right? So we've talked about the why these interviews are so crucial and touched on the how deep listening, nonverbal cues, frameworks like the COPPM. But for our listeners, someone who's already familiar with occupational therapy, what's the real takeaway here? How does understanding this level of interviewing change their perspective?
It boils down to this.
Yeah.
Even within a field that already emphasizes individualization, there are levels to it. These interviews, they're not just about gathering data, they're about building a partnership. It changes how you, as an OT, approach every single intervention, every goal you set.
Because now you're not just treating a diagnosis, you're walking alongside someone as they rebuild their life.
Exactly, and that's where the true power of occupational therapy lies.
Okay, so much to think about already, but let's keep going. One thing that struck me in the material was how often the word collaboration came up, almost more than assessment. Can you talk more about that shift?
It's a fantastic point, and it really sets occupational therapy apart.
Hmm?
Traditional healthcare models often position the clinician as the expert, right? Dispensing knowledge, dictating treatment. But in OT, particularly within these interviews, there's a recognition that the client is the expert on their own life.
It's like that saying, you are the expert on you, and the therapist is there to help you tap into that expertise.
Precisely. So instead of approaching the interview as a fact-finding mission, it becomes a process of shared discovery. The therapist brings their clinical knowledge, of course, but they also bring genuine curiosity, a willingness to learn from the client's unique experiences.
Which, let's be honest, is probably way more effective in the long run, right? Because you can tell someone what to do until you're blue in the face, but if they don't feel ownership over it, it's not going to stick.
Absolutely. And that sense of ownership, that feeling of being heard and understood, it can make all the difference. It can be the difference between someone passively going through the motions of therapy and truly embracing their recovery journey.
So how do therapists cultivate that sense of ownership from the get-go? We've talked about deep listening, using frameworks like the COPPM, but it feels like there's even more to it.
You're spot on. It's about going beyond simply gathering information and moving into shared decision-making. And this is where those interviewing skills become really crucial.
Can you give me an example? What does that look like in an actual session?
Okay, let's say a therapist is working with someone who was recently diagnosed with arthritis, and they're struggling with everyday tasks, like getting dressed or cooking. Instead of just handing them a list of assistive devices, a skilled therapist might say something like, "Tell me, what are your biggest challenges when it comes to getting dressed in the morning?" Or, "What parts of cooking are you finding most difficult now?" By framing the questions this way, they're inviting the client to identify their own priorities and be a part of finding solutions.
It's like handing over the reins a little bit, empowering the client to be in the driver's seat of their own therapy.
Exactly. And from there, the conversation naturally evolves into this collaborative brainstorming session. The therapist can share their clinical knowledge, of course, but it's done within the context of the client's actual life and what matters to them.
That makes so much sense. It's about finding solutions together, not just prescribing them.
Precisely. And when clients feel like their voices are being heard, when they're a part of creating their own treatment plan, their motivation skyrockets. They're more likely to stick with their home exercises, to try new things, and ultimately to see better outcomes.
So it's like this ripple effect, right? A well-conducted interview can have this incredible impact that goes way beyond that initial conversation.
It really is. It can influence the course of therapy, shape treatment plans, and ultimately empower clients to take charge of their own well-being.
And it's not just about the impact on the client, right? The articles also talked about how enriching these conversations can be for the therapists themselves.
Absolutely. By truly listening to their clients' stories, therapists gain a deeper understanding of the human experience, the challenges people face, the resilience they find within themselves. It's a continuous journey of learning and growth.
It humanizes the profession. It reminds us that behind every diagnosis, every condition, there's a person with their own unique set of experiences, hopes, and dreams.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that connection and empathy are at the heart of healing, and that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a simple conversation.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. It's really shifted my perspective on something we often take for granted. The art of conversation.
Yeah.
Asking the right questions, truly listening, approaching every interaction with a spirit of collaboration. It can lead to some really powerful outcomes.
I couldn't agree more. It's a reminder that in occupational therapy, and honestly in life, sometimes the most powerful tool we have is our ability to connect with one another on a deeper level.
It makes you wonder, when was the last time you had a conversation that truly left you feeling seen, heard, and empowered? Something for all of us to reflect on. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the art of interviewing in occupational therapy. Hopefully this has given you some new insights and inspired you to see those everyday conversations in a whole new light.